The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Glory to you, O Lord. As Jesus was passing through a field of grain on the Sabbath, his disciples began to make a path while picking the heads of grain. At this, the Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was in need and he and his companions were hungry? How he went into the house of God, where Abiathar was high priest, and ate the bread of offering that only the priests could lawfully eat, and shared it with his companions." Then he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That is why the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath." The Gospel of the Lord. Yeah, I don't know that we catch it, but this is really, really edgy and confrontational stuff from Jesus. You know, we look at the commandments, right? I mean, we have some vague familiarity with with the Ten Commandments, right? I mean, these are the basic foundation stones of Israel's life, and not just their life, like their national life, seen in any number of expressions, but not just their natural life, but their life lived with God. These are the most sacred things. Keeping holy the Sabbath is a pretty big deal, and it's a big deal for any number of reasons that I don't really want to get into this morning. But there's no, how do I say that? There's no way of saying it. Yeah, it's significant in the extreme. Keeping holy the Sabbath. This is not just some casual, Jesus, why are your disciples turning right on red? It's not that kind of thing. Why did they roll through the stop sign? That's not the kind of thing that's going on. This is a very, very significant law, and it's more than a law, at least the way that we tend to conceive of law. And here he is, right? Here they are. In a way, flagrantly disobeying the law of the Sabbath. Now, in part, there's a tension because there's interpretation of that law and what it demands. And the Pharisees, for 200 years prior to Jesus coming on the scene, they're being formed as a pressure group that exerts some political muscle, but also some popular, they have popular strength as well, in the sense that people will look to them for the proper interpretation of the law. But they're a bit, they're hard-nosed folks, at least the ones that are out here snooping on Jesus, right, watching him and his guys come through the field. Now, that also ought to inform us of the fact that Jesus's movement it's a competing movement to that of the Pharisees, and it itself is gaining in popularity, right? It's becoming widespread, the fact that Jesus is doing these kinds of things, whatever these kinds of things are. I mean, things like healing and the rest, but also that he's making certain claims about himself and his movement, such that the Pharisees are out there snooping on him. Now, the claims that he's making, more generally to this point, he's going in this passage to double down on and make much more apparent to his adversaries, like this, right? They are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath, at least in the mind of the Pharisees, and it seems as though Jesus actually is willing to accept that, say, yeah, okay, we are, but let me give you the exception here. Let me give you the reason why we are able to do what we're doing. He says, have you never read what David did? Well, here we go, right? King David, right? The beloved king of Israel, right? The great unifier, the one who achieves, I think, in Israel's memory, all that they expected to be as a people. It happens in David because he's God's anointed king. But you didn't hear when David was in need with his companions. They were hungry. They went into the house of God when Abiathar was high priest. They did what they couldn't do. Why? Because David was God's anointed king, and he was not yet enthroned. I mean, for Jesus to go to this example, right, it's basically, he's saying, the Pharisees come to him and say, "What? You can't do what you're doing." And he said, "Yes, I can, because I'm God's anointed king. Just because I haven't taken the throne yet, it doesn't mean that that we can't do this. We are God's renewal movement," right? Again, it's this same thing. It's this same conflict. The Pharisees are coming and saying, you're not following our rules. You're not going about the quote-unquote renewal of Israel the way that we have set course. He said, but it's not your course to set. This is what Jesus is saying. He's the one who carries the agenda. He's the one at the head of the movement. He is the Lord. He is Israel's anointed king, the king of the Jews, right? So he's giving it to them there, an example. And you say, like, this is tough enough for them to hear. I don't know whether or not you care about, the kind of the emotional experience of the Pharisees. Whatever. This is hard for them to hear. They're being challenged with it. And then he says what? The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That is why the Son of Man, that's him, is Lord even of the Sabbath. Are you kidding me? Right? He's Lord even over God's revealed commandments. And you're going to see that, of course, in the Sermon on the Mount, right? Matthew 5-7. You heard that it was said, but I say to you. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of do this build up to say, do you know who Jesus is? Do you know who he is? His adversaries of that time knew very clearly who he claimed to be. Are we living as though he's that person? We're his friends. We're his friends and his followers. We should know better who he is than his adversaries. Now, part of it is also this, right? And I think this is one of the ways that we get derailed. It's not the only way, so sorry, I can't give you the foolproof plan this morning, even though I'm sure that's why you came. But one of the ways that we get derailed is this: our agenda. Our agenda. Even after the agenda of God has been revealed to us. What is the agenda of God? What is Jesus about? Already we're 2 chapters into this thing. It's already revealed that what Jesus wants to do is renew Israel to restore creation. How many of you want to do that? How many of you want to be part of God's renewed people, that's Israel, so that you can have the strength, power, wherewithal, and the rest to restore creation? Right, this is, if I could put it in a little tighter way, it's to say what Jesus' project is about: renewed image bearing. This is, and where'd you get that from? Where'd I get that from? Right at the beginning. Right, when God created all things, he created them good. He created them out of love. And he created humans to be his image bearers. And when Jesus arrives on the scene, his image bearers are disfigured. He's not. Right? He can exercise this. This is why he can be at the head of his people. He can be at the head of a renewed image-bearing movement. But that's what he's come to do. Are we good image bearers? Are we summing up creation's praise and offering it to God? Are we taking what we receive from God and exercising his wise stewardship? Are we worshiping God and serving him? Are we praying? Praying well. I told you, we're shooting at praying well, but in order to pray well, you have to pray. So don't say, well, I can't pray well, so I'm not going to pray. No, you have to pray so as to become a better prayer, and then you have to love so as to become a better lover. That's what we're made to be, people of prayer and love. That's how we bear the image of God. That's what the project is. But we keep turning it into something else. And I don't know why. I don't want to shout at you, because I'm sure that some of this has to do with, our how would I say, with our brokenness. And I don't think that any of us is going to get shouted out of our brokenness. I've been trying. I've been trying for years. I got to go about it some other way. No, what is it going to take? I mean, I think that we have to at least have in front of us, what the target is, what the point is. It's renewed image bearing for us. It's being part of God's renewed people. And you see, even going from there, right, one to the other, renewed image bearing to being part of his renewed people, we say that Our sociability matters. Our being together as a people matters. And all too often, even that gets sidelined because it doesn't quite fit my agenda. Because my agenda is like a self-saving agenda. We use religion for that purpose. We use our faith for that purpose. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But it's hard to get into this space. We use it for, it's like, okay, well, how am I going to save myself today? How am I going to use Jesus to save myself today? That's backwards, right? And in your prayer, maybe you can do a little bit of that work and see whether or not that's going on. Whether we're trying to use Jesus or we're allowing Jesus to bring us to full flourishing as his people. There's a world of difference. And we can't be content to stay in the one. Because in the end, we can't save ourselves. And that's what Jesus has done. And look, this is it, right? He's taking the most sacred thing of Israel, and he's rewriting it around himself to advance God's agenda. And as it was, he can do it. He's the Lord. But what parts of our hearts and our lives will we not allow him to be Lord of? He's rewriting the most sacred thing. Now we celebrate. Look, Saint Anthony is the hermit. Saint Anthony is a great intercessor for us today. Why? Because he took this being renewed so seriously that he allowed it to drive him into the desert, to give God free reign over every part of his life. Now, I'm not saying that we have to go into the desert. Part of the confirming of the holiness of Saint Anthony is his being moved from the desert to come back and battle against, I believe, the Arian heresy, and to be used in the plan and purpose of God there. And then he returns to the desert, right? He returns to the project. But all of it is the project. I'm not saying that we have to spend decades of our lives out in the desert to do. If God calls you out there, then so be it. But what we do have to do is every day we have to take the renewal that God wants to effect in us and through us very seriously. Right? We can't have anything that comes before Jesus, anything that comes before God and his purposes. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Not even our perceived right way of doing this thing and that thing and the other thing. No, it's all about Jesus. He's at the head. He's the one who is renewing us. But it's ours now to give ourselves over to him and to allow him to do whatever it is he wants to do in us and through us. That project will be renewed image bearing, and we as his renewed people will be called to restore his creation as his good image bearers. But we have to give ourselves over to the project and allow him to do what he wants to do. And we have to allow him to love us into life, and then work that, and then allow him to work that love through us so that we can raise his fallen world in the power of his own life of love.